fantasy. It's not something that I feel like as an artist that I've struggled with it in terms of how I relate to fantasy. I am a man that kind of works with things. I'm a very physical person. Everything that I create is derived from this physical realm. So when I started doing kind of how do I fit in, research into what fantasy, how I can relate to it, some of the definitions, the one that I connected with, it's a kind of Greek word, and it's about creativity. It's about manifesting. It's about, it's not about something that is outside the realm. I think for some people it is, but for me it is not. I'm going to draw a blank here because I'm slightly nervous. I'm glad there's not 300 people. I'm glad we're not in Minneapolis. And I was going to run out and get my notes, but this deluge happened, and I thought I'm going to get all wet. So let me click the first image and get you to kind of where I started over 30 years ago in the warehouse district. Let me just give you kind of a brief history of me. The House of Balls started, this was the space where it started before I even had a name. There are a couple balls in there somewhere, but I've always worked with a lot of different materials. The signature element being a bowling ball, because, you know, who else carves bowling balls? The name means so many different things. You know, for one, it's this thing that I work with, this medium, but it also means, you know, it's a masculine thing, it's a feminine thing. It's about having the courage, I think, as Drew talked about in the manifesto, it's about having the courage to stand up and be yourself, to be creative in whatever form that is. I know so many of you live a creative life, but they're so different from each other. You know, we're all this kind of collective strength. Part of my conversation today is about how we as individuals work together, and this tension between I as the individual creating my own world, my own fantasy world, as juxtaposed against how we can work together to really create the world we all, I think, collectively want to work in or live in. Again, bowling balls are kind of this signature thing that I work with, although piano parts are becoming, you know, over the years something that actually is this woman here. So you can see what she was in the beginning. And as she moved on, you can get a sense of how, I don't know why I'm so nervous. I've done this before. Mary Jane, what can you tell me how do I step up? This was let me just talk about the slides. This was a series I'd done for a museum in Baltimore for a show that was at the American Vision Art Museum. And this was kind of the first series of piano figures that was based off this model, this kind of way of attaching things. I'd done pieces out of piano parts, have done them for many years, but they were in a kind of different construction mode. There's a piece outside. I have a friend whose father designed brushes. He was a kind of fuller brush guy, except he did it on an industrial scale. He passed away, and not wanting to throw this material, this kind of detritus that we're surrounded by. This is how I work. We're surrounded by all this incredible material. And what can we do to revalue our lives in some way? What can we do to, what is the currency we want to live in? This is kind of the ethos of the House of Balls is, this is my gift to the world. I've had this public studio for 30 years. You are all welcome to cross the threshold and become a part of it, to have a dialogue with me. This is how I get my ideas. You know, I'm the physical guy, but it's through the dialogue I have with you that generates the ideas for me to move forward. And this is part of this tension between how I work as an individual, but I need you to kind of, to give me, to fill my cup, so until it runneth over. I want to, you know, I need you to give me the ideas. I mean, I translate them. Yeah, part of the, again, part of the waste stream, again, we're this detritus about that we're surrounded with. What is the waste? What can you see in your lives that you can repurpose, revalue, taking things, not only physical things, but I think the thoughts in our lives, how can we take them and give them a new sense of meaning and of, again, currency. Masks, I've always been fascinated by what's behind the mask. So in some ways, by putting something in front of your face, you now can see you can now become, it's kind of an introvert's way to connect with the world. I can hide behind that mask and become the extrovert that I've always wanted to be. This is at the studio. Part of it is like the piece on the right. This was ductwork from the demo. I did a series of ductwork pieces that I had taken out when I put in new heating and air conditioning systems, and I hated to throw them out. I work for a mechanical contractor, and I run across these materials all the time, but I'd never had them available to me sitting in a pile, and I knew I should keep them, don't recycle them, do something with them, and this is one of 4 pieces I came up with. The other piece is a kind of fire barrel where I just wanted to work with. I have a friend that owns a company that reconditions barrels. Again, here's a company that is doing what we need to do. They take, instead of scrapping them out, mining ore, you know, building new, why not take this thing, these items, recondition them, and put them back into use. So this, for me, was an experiment in taking 4 barrels. What could I do? How could I chop them up? There's 3 stacked, the shoulders and the rear. There's 2 butt cheeks that are the 4th barrel, so they're just segmented. This is a piece down in Chicago at a hotel that's a LEED certified hotel. So again, they wanted to play off the recycling aspect of how society has to move forward, you know, by taking things, how we think about the environment, how we think about the next generation. What are we leaving our children? I have 2 daughters, and it concerns me that um, that their dad is like wearing a helmet that's gonna shoot fireworks off out of his head, which is like that. Just remember, you really don't need, with a helmet like that, you really don't need the suit. All the sparks kind of fly to the side. You will not get burned. Most of kind of the slides I've been showing, this is my lovely wife, most of the slides I've been showing up to this point are kind of based off what I do as an individual. This is, if you're familiar with the Art Shanty project, is that kind of collective work. Now, these are individual artists creating these specific environments, but they're working collectively in groups, and we are collectively, as a whole, sharing it with the public, sharing it to kind of hopefully inspire and to move the way, you know, how you think about the world. What's the possibility? What can we create out on a frozen lake that you can then bring to the lake when it's unfrozen in July and create something else? If you've ever seen that truck, that's my truck. This is out in Nebraska at Carhenge. On it we go to Burning Man, which again is about one of the most unique. You pay for the ticket, you pay to get there, but to be in a place where nothing is for sale, you're not being hawked anything, so the idea of gifting without expectation of return, where can you do that? Right here. I mean, this is a one segment of that. So the question is, where else can we do that? The Art Shanty project is another one. You really have to create those places and spaces where it's not driven by the greenback and, you know, that kind of currency. Creativity is not, it shouldn't be about how much you can stick in your bank account. What's that? Hierarchy. Hierarchy. She's telling me about my notes, which, you know, one of my thoughts was hierarchy being, you know, we kind of live in this world, and this last week has been so, this is where the hierarchy, where it kind of has left me feeling a huge hole in my heart. This chain of command, this climbing the ladder, this suppression, it's about control. And the kind of antonym to hierarchy is equality and kind of the level playing field. I kind of see it as a horizontal line where you're grounded, you're rooted. Why can't we move? Why can't we fall down and become more rooted? You know, this I think is where, as a society, this question of where we want to go, this tension between where I want to go, where we want to go, that's this balancing act that I think all of us here need to find. Again, this is a piece I've done in collaboration with a woman for Aveda has a trash and show. So it's again about taking your waste. The skirt is made out of coat hangers. There's a number of things from fireplaces and railroad spikes, and it was very heavy for this woman, who I've never seen. Her waist is so small, it's unbelievable. This is a piece that was for the Bakken Museum. They had a green garden, again, getting a series of artists together talking about energy. So this was my Iron Man. This was talking about different forms of energy: magnetic energy, battery capacity, solar energy. There's the figure's holding a solar panel. So it's about giving kids a sense of all the different energy forms that that we can kind of read. I don't know that I think there's a lot of energy. We are but energy. I'm an electrician by trade, so I'm really tapped in. Some days, literally tapped in to this unseen force that surrounds us. And what we see is the kind of result of that energy. It powers things. It powers the lights. It powers the stage light. But so what is the unseen energy that that is going to drive us to the Dumpster Duel Show? This was, again, a collaboration where we hosted an event by Barebones Theater. If you've ever been to the Dumpster Duels, it's a wonderful, it's an annual event where generally 3 to 4 teams of artists come in. They have 24 hours to dig through this dumpster, come up with a set, come up with a storyline. These are the rules. Like this year, this was the rules. Show must have puppets. Show must be 20 minutes or less. Most of the rules are never followed. But but they're judged, and some of the judges are anal, and they look at the rules and say, well, you didn't stop when the bell for the train came. Oh, well. This was Atlas Obscura Day, where one of the founders came. He was at the studio, and it was, again, for me, it's about opening up the studio. It's about sharing this space, sharing what I know, so that hopefully people will kind of get hooked into something that they will then, take off on. It's about finding self. Again, the Art Shanty project, this was a bear that I had worked with on a group of amazing people that came up with an idea. Again, being an electrician by trade, this is made out of all recycled materials, conduit. We took snow fencing, we took plastic that had been discarded from a construction site. When they wrap it in the winter, all found, all cheap, all reusable, all something that makes burned into a memory. When you see 10 people out there riding this thing, you know they're going to remember it the rest of their lives. This is the last slide. This is again from the Atlas Obscura Day. And to me, it's kind of emblematic of, what is the gift, kind of asking you, what is the gift that you want to give, that we want to give to our children, to ourselves, to make this world. We've got a lot of issues right now, and I think we can figure this out. Hopefully, looking at the fact that we haven't had a hard freeze yet. I don't know. There's some issues here, but please believe that we can make this thing, that we can make the world we all want to live in. Whether it's you as an individual and how you connect, how we connect. And that's all I have to say.
All right. Thanks, Alan. That was great.
That was.
I know
was
you're a
more
little nervous,
yes.
but you did really, really well.
I'm better at Q&A.
Let's give him a round of applause. He did well. All right, so we're gonna move to some Q&A. I hope you guys have some questions. Alan's got a lot to share, and we're gonna make sure that you guys get the mic so you can speak into it. We're gonna try to record it so we have it for later. So raise your hand. We'll get you this mic, and then Alan will take a shot. You ready?
Yes.
All right.
One of the things is they're why piano pieces. So there's kind of a multitude of facets to the answer I'd give you. One is they're just beautifully crafted, and I think it's a craft that it's an art form that has been lost in terms of the manufacturing process. For the most part, they're now going to be made by some machine tool like that. But this was a huge. This is kind of where I struggle with Donald Trump's idea of how we bring jobs back to America. You know, that's about finding the cheapest labor, and technology has totally shifted how we're going to have to approach employment. So. Back to your question, piano parts. When I look at them, I just see they're already imbued with color. I don't have to deal with that. They're organic. They're all wood for the most part, and just by cutting them up and severing them. And the other thing is when I think about what they did, you know, here's this stroke of a key, or that then is translated into like 3 or 4 different movements that strike a string, and this is one note of 88, and they're all like, wow, this is what this building is about. This is what McNally Smith is based on, sound, and I've always felt that the things that I work with are imbued with whatever they were intended to be. So for me, there's still this energy from all the people that pushed on those keys, and it's still, I can almost feel it when I am holding those pieces in my hand. So.
Alan, where does the inspiration come from for any particular sculpture, any particular piece, like these pieces that are on the stage? Where does the inspiration come from?
The 3 that I had done originally were, I'd had my hip replaced, and so the male figure of that family was kind of an experiment for me to try this different approach with piano. This was during my recovery. So that male figure is just about placing the figures unmodified and kind of creating this figure. The next 2 became much more, I began to see, well, no, if I back trim and start to knit them as tightly as I can, they're resonating more with me. I like that finished aspect of them. So when I'd done those 3, AVAM came and took the pieces for the show, and somebody purchased the pieces to donate to their to their permanent collection, and I never got to love the pieces. So she was created because I just wanted one to love. And and she couldn't be alone. She had to have a partner too, so I just finished him a couple months ago. So she's feeling much better. Another question?
Thank you. I'm just curious, you talked about being inspired by the conversations and the dialogue that you have with others, and you just translate that
Yes.
into your work. And you've hinted a little bit about some of your feelings regarding this past week in the election. I'm just curious, in terms of the next thing you create, how are we going to see, like, what are we going to see in the next thing that you create based on the dialogue that we're having now as a country, as a global, participant? I'm just curious how we're going to see that in your work.
Funny you would mention that. I was actually going to bring these two pieces, but they're fairly tall. I'm making a 24-foot woman made out of the steel rod. I used to, years ago, did this series of figures made out of this rod that is made by a company that makes mesh. So they take this reel of steel rod, they run it through a crimper, and they weave mesh. So the remnants of that have this kind of energetic pattern that moves through it. So I can form those, and it's got this imbued energy already kind of within the material. And I'd been, I'd lost the connection. I remade it, and I've always wanted. I love women. In some ways, it's about me. I love women. There's something about this election that is so disturbing because it really is stepping back from, I think, the equality that we've had brought up to us. Whatever Hillary's issues are, I think so much of it was driven by the fact that she was a woman and not frigging emails or Benghazi or, it's this patriarchal system we live in. So I'm going to make this 24-foot woman, and she's going to stand outside, and I want to have like plants coming so she becomes this green, living figure. So that's the kind of national conversation that all of a sudden I'm working on a piece for.
What?
Well, is she a nasty woman? I don't know.
And when will we see it? What is your process like, and do you know when you'll be completed or done with the piece?
Do I know when I've completed work? I used to not know. When I first started, there were a lot of things that I always never kind of recognized the end. It always felt like I could do something else. But after about 10 or 15 years of that crap, I said, no, I began to say, this is finished, let's move on, because it really held me back. When you're saying all these things are unfinished, no, you at some point you have to decide, I am done. It's time to move on to that next moment and that next kind of creative endeavor. And that really opened me up to so many more materials, so many, the mediums changed, and the conversations changed. By having a public space, I really feel blessed by the ability to have somebody walk in and really change how I look at the world. And let me just say right here and now, please come to the House of Balls, and let's have that conversation, because I think we all need it.
What do you do if, when you're starting a piece and thinking about it one way and then finding out that maybe what you're thinking isn't working, or you come up with a block because all of a sudden you get stopped? What do you do in that sense?
I just had this conversation, a half an hour ago. You kind of move to something until you're unblocked. You find some kind of laxative to, It's really about kind of finding this, maybe finding something you can work collectively with, or sometimes it's just, I never can stop playing with something. So it's really just about continuing to play until you until you can kind of regurgitate in your mind subconsciously what's wrong, and at some point it resolves itself. Sometimes it's just, okay, you can't, this is not what you need to do.
I'm curious about you mentioned pianos and mesh. I'm curious about where you get your raw materials.
My theory is that if you know what you want, go to the source. So if you want pianos, who would you call? I call the piano repair place because they're the ones that have their hands on them all the time, and they're probably the ones that are going to throw them out if they, So if you want bowling balls, call a bowling alley. If you want dentures, call your dentist. That's one facet of how I acquire materials. Sometimes people just come up and say, I got a bunch of stuff. I was a computer, there was a guy that came a couple months ago. I was a computer salesman, and I've been dragging this stuff around for years, and do you want it? And lo and behold, here are all these amazing, circuit boards from, that are no longer this small, but have substance and have, they're like piano parts. They're no longer, this is when pre-electronic, pre-compressed, when designers created things for form as much as function. That's why I like working with older objects, because I think they mirror humanity. They mirror our, it's easy for me to take those things and repurpose them because they always look like me. They always look like us. That's why I work in the human figure. It's about kind of the sublime, how am I connecting with you, but how am I connecting with our past, our future, our present? And that's through us. So I don't think dogs work.
Okay. Alan, I have a question for you. As a creative person, I often have a difficult time sleeping, and I'm wondering if you create in your sleep.
My dreams, I don't have dreams where I'm like working, creating things. I think they're giving me different lessons, and I don't remember a lot of my dreams. I generally don't get enough sleep, so that when I do sleep, I don't remember anything. I tend to think that my waking life is my dream world, so that, this is where I'm kind of working through everything.
Thank you, sir, for sharing your wisdom and your energy. I like how the repurpose and all that kind of stuff. Is there something that you would tell your younger self, or a piece of wisdom that you would, if you could, go back and say, hey, look at things from this point of view, or, if you're back in school or as a kid or something along those lines? That gets into those kind of regret moments. And if I didn't have mistakes and I didn't have all the things that make me me, I don't know. That's a really difficult question to kind of answer without saying, without being that regretful, what would I change? I wish I read more. I wish I have two beautiful daughters, and I feel like I spent a lot of time with them, but maybe having spent more time with them would have been something that I don't regret it, but I just love them dearly, and I wish maybe that I would have spent a little more time with them.
regrets, no regrets. I've got a question about, you talked about Burning Man, and you just kind of glossed over it, but given that it is an amalgam of, 50, 60, 70,000 creative types, can you talk about the aspect of collaboration and how politics can enter into that arena?
Well, politics has begun to enter it the last 5 years or so. I think politics has always been a facet of it, but the politics that are now entering it are, again, due to the greenback currency as opposed to the creative currency. And that's that people are now there are these plug-and-play theme camps where, you sign the check and everything's covered for you. Well, Burning Man is supposed to be about self, about bringing everything you need, about participation, about what is the gift you bring to the common good. And when you're only there to be an observer and wear a fancy costume and like go back and have your meals made for you by your chef, and that is not participation. This is, and that's, I'm struggling with that about even going back. I'm retiring this year, so I can be an artist full time. And so the lead up to that was going to Burning Man again and come back, and 2 weeks later, I'm retired. I don't know that I'm going to go. We took the year off this year, kind of struggling whether that's where I want to go. It is an amazing, if you've never been there, for sure, the collaborative, there's a lot of money involved, believe me, to create the scale of this work, and it's just phenomenal. Have any of you been there? Any hands? It's pretty stunning to kind of to know that you're a part of this organic creative force that comes out to the desert for once a week, and the logistics of that, and it ain't green, because think about it, what it takes to get there. So part of it is like rethinking how what it's always been is bringing it back with you and manifesting it in the default world. Well, this is my default world. This is your default world. So how can we create what you have there here?
All right, I think we have to wrap up, but you'll probably be available to answer a few more afterwards if people want to ask. So let's give Alan a round of applause.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
And if you don't know where the House of Balls is, just look it up online. Otherwise, the West Bank of Minneapolis, Cedar Riverside LRT stop, it abuts it. If you were ever at the Medusa, which probably a couple of you were, but many of you not, it was a punk rock venue, totally underground. That's where it is. Please come, and thank you so much for being here. I'm humbled.
Thank you.